That you, as a sort of post 9/11 prosecutor with all this experience about terrorism, think this is really dangerous. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, it's bad for our party, but more importantly, it's bad for our country.
Do you agree with Christopher Wray, who says that domestic violent extremism is now the gravest threat to the homeland?
I don't know if Chris still thinks that.
He testified to that in September.
He did, and I don't know if he's still...
And again in February.
I don't know if he's...
And again, I think, in May.
Well, okay, and I don't know if he... listen, I haven't spoken to Chris. I don't know if he still thinks that, but what I do think is it's definitely a big threat to the country.
What's bigger? What could be bigger if you don't agree with Chris Wray?
I think that what's happening in Afghanistan now and what the results of that could become an even bigger threat, and we'll see. And I don't know whether Chris, after the disaster of Afghanistan, whether Chris's opinion is still the same, because that's pretty fresh. But there's no doubt that violence inside, and we saw this happen not only surrounding the election of 2020 on January 6th, but we saw it in places like Portland and Seattle, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and other places.
So Chris Wray's testimony, though, I just want to be clear about what he's testified to, and I take it, if you don't agree with him, you don't agree with him, but what he testified to was, and I believe the quote is, it is the greatest threat to the homeland, and within that bucket, by far the largest group is white supremacy. So white supremacists did not threaten Portland and New York. What are you saying?
I'm expanding on what Chris said.
But do you agree or not that white supremacists inspired domestic violent extremism is the greatest threat to the homeland?
I don't know that I agree it's the greatest threat, is what I'm saying to you. But there's no question that it is a threat. And I agree with Chris in that regard. And I think there's lots of other threats that we have to be concerned about as well. And I think whenever we label something the greatest threat, to the extent that when you do that, you exclude looking at the other ones or minimize looking at the other ones, that's not good for the safety and security of the American people either.
Would you disavow any support from white supremacist aligned militia groups if you run for president?
Absolutely.
So if the Proud Boys, if you run, you would disavow their support, their presence at any...
In 5 seconds afterwards, because I believe, as I wrote in the book, like Ronald Reagan did with the John Birch Society, he said, they may support me, but I don't support them. And Ronald Reagan made it very clear that he didn't stand for that. I think that's the way we have to deal with any of these extremist groups on the right and the left.
Who are the extremist groups on the left?
Oh, listen, there's Antifa is clearly...
Christopher Wray in the same testimony in September said they're not an organization.
Well, look, I disagree with Chris on that. And I think there are extremist groups on the left and the right in this country, and any serious political candidate for national office, if supported by an extremist group that advocates violence, whether it's going all the way back to the Ku Klux Klan or to any of the groups that we have today, they need to be rejected.
So Donald Trump didn't do that. Did you talk to him about that?
Well, look, going all the way back to 2016.
David Duke.
Right. I was, if not the first one on the phone with him, I was the one urged, as I wrote in my last book, by Reince Priebus to call him immediately and get him to reject that. He ultimately did, not as quickly as I might have liked.
So Jake Tapper, disavow, you want me to disavow, fine Jake, I disavow. It's not really, I mean, they didn't hear it.
He also put out another statement after that.
But David Duke didn't hear it that way.
Well, I don't know how David Duke heard it, neither do you, because thankfully...
But I think in the video, we'll find it.
Because thankfully, neither one of us are inside David Duke's head. Not a place I want to be, and I'm sure you know.
He spoke publicly, and I guess I want to get...
You love the video, I'm more than happy to look at it and give you my opinion.
I'm happy to know that you don't want any of their support, but I guess my question is, if you can identify domestic violent extremism, at least alongside perhaps other threats that you're aware of that Christopher Wray hasn't testified to yet publicly, and you believe that conspiracy theories are dangerous and liars are dangerous to the party and the country, how is it that you arrive at supporting Donald Trump again if he runs in 2024?
I didn't say that.
If he's the nominee of our party, will you vote for him?
I would not. I didn't say that I would. What I've said in answer to that question over the last 3 days that gets asked all the time is, I'll see what happens in 2024 as to who the nominee is and who's run, and if I decide to run, and what the party is doing at that time. And I think to prejudge that stuff way in advance is something that is irresponsible to do.
So,
but I'll be
myself. Donald Trump right now, I think, has the support of 67% of respondents in the most recent poll. And I know there's some Iowa polling that shows something different, and I hope you're right. But if he's the nominee of the party, are you going to vote for him or no?
What I'm about in this book, and what I'm about going forward and trying to do, is to give our party a different pathway. Right now, the only pathway that Donald Trump is showing us is grievance about the 2020 election and vendettas towards other Republicans, rather than providing a contrast to what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are proposing for the country. That